Well, the first thing I'm going to do is after we do the national anthem, is we'll have Lee speak.
Yes, about habitat. Yep.
Frank, you want me to, well, why don't I just welcome everybody at this point and you can play the national anthem. I want to
Yep.
thank everybody for tuning in this morning because we have an important person that affects our community. I want to thank our annual sponsors, Lewis Joes and Covanter and Toomey Latham and Gershow. And today's sponsor is Habitat for Humanity, represented by Lee Silberman. And as soon as we have the national anthem, I'll have Lee speak and tell us a little about Habitat. We're ready to go, Frank.
Okay, I'm going to play our national anthem, the one that's been
Hello?
selected for this week, right
Can
now.
anybody hear me?
Yes, give me 1 minute for the national anthem, please.
Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed as the twilight's last gleaming? Would the bright and bright stars through the perilous skies, o'er the ramparts we watched, were so gallantly streaming. And the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave through the night. Their flag was still there, still there. Oh, sing those that star-spangled and the
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more
Hi,
videos, highlights
thank you, Frank. Is everybody hearing me? Am I coming across properly?
I think you are. To me, you are.
Okay, good. Because I just got a signal on my thing that says my internet was unstable. On the other hand, Marguerite's in another room, and I can hear her it coming over well. Marguerite, you got that very good, the anthem, right? Okay, good. By the way, I want to key in Lee Silverman. He is our sponsor today. Habitat for Humanity has done great work for people in building houses and helping people build their own houses. Lee, you want to take over?
Thank you, Ernie. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. I always like to talk about the 3 myths of Habitat for Humanity. The first myth is Jimmy Carter did not start the organization. He just is our most famous volunteer. The second myth is that between donated products, volunteer labor, and the generous donation of land by the county and towns, that it doesn't cost anything to build our homes. We actually have to fundraise approximately $250,000 for every home that we build in Suffolk County. We're doing our best to build about 8 a year, so my job is to raise about $2 million a year. The third myth is that we give our homes away. We actually sell our homes at full market value to the homeowner. It's a proven fact that when Habitat builds in an area, we actually raise home values on that street, because usually our house is the nicest house on the street by the time that we're done. And the way we make the house affordable is by subsidizing the mortgage. And the fact that our homeowners don't have a down payment, they have sweat equity, about 300 hours instead of a down payment. Now, recently, COVID really highlights the need for affordable housing. It's very difficult to follow a stay-at-home order if you do not have a decent home. And communities of color were hardest hit, and that can be directly correlated to the lack of affordable housing. The areas without affordable housing tend to be the areas hardest hit. And as I said, that's the communities of color. Now, we sponsored this meeting today in an attempt to open a dialogue with the town to help solve the affordable housing crisis in Huntington. Over the years, the town of Huntington has had a poor record of supporting affordable housing within the town. I do want to emphasize that this is long before Supervisor Lupinacci came into office. So I'm hoping that we can change that dialogue. Despite the recent zoning decision to set back the cause of affordable housing, I'm hoping that Supervisor Lupinacci will partner with Habitat for Humanity of Suffolk to find creative ways for us to together alleviate the crisis of affordable housing so that our workers, our essential workers, can actually afford to live in the town in which they work. And again, I want to thank LIMBA again for the opportunity of sponsoring this meeting, and I look forward to hearing what Supervisor Lupinacci has to say.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Lee.
Ernie.
What we're going to do now is we're going to introduce the supervisor and let him give us some opening remarks, and we'll build some questions from there. But I do have a couple of specific questions for the supervisor, but why don't we let him start? Is there anything in the format that we should be handling now, Frank?
Well, we do want to explain that there is a procedure if you'd like to ask questions, that there's a way in the software that you raise your hand, and if you can't find a little spot on the screen, you can press Alt-Y or Option-Y if you have a Mac on your keyboard, and if you're dialed in on the phone, it's *9. And then once you raise your hand, then we'll be able to put you into a queue and recognize, unmute you and allow you to ask your question. And Supervisor Lupinacci, you should have an ability to unmute right now.
Yes.
Great. Okay, good. We're on our way.
Good. Very good.
Good morning.
Good morning, Ernie.
And you've been a professor, an assemblyman. I think it was an assembly, right?
Yes.
And now you're the supervisor of Huntington, and we'd like to know, some opening remarks from you. Maybe you'd like to talk about some of the things you tried and were successful at. Maybe you'd like to talk about some of the things that you'd like to see be successful. In any case, you got the floor for the next 10 minutes.
Okay, very good. And good morning, everyone. And it's certainly great to be here. Thank you to Ernie and LIMBA, and of course Lee for sponsoring today, and Habitat, and for joining us. And just as Ernie mentioned, right, this is my 3rd year now as supervisor. Prior to being supervisor, I served about 5.5 years in the New York State Assembly, and prior to that, about 8.5 years on the South Huntington School Board. My background is, my trade is a lawyer, but also teaching too in the areas of government and business law. So it is certainly great to be here. And I guess I'll talk a little bit about first the COVID-19 response and how that's kind of changed the world and changed the town of Huntington. Just to kind of give you a little background on Huntington, if you look at the town of Huntington, it's about a population of 215,000, diverse area. And like I always say, if you kind of shrink America into a town of 215,000, you get the town of Huntington. We have, I believe, one of the greatest downtown areas in probably in America, right? Huntington Village, but our hamlets are great, whether it's Green Lawn or Cold Spring Harbor or Northport Village, but really a great place to be, to raise a family, to own a business, to work, for the kids to attend school out of the 8 school districts that we have that crisscross the town. So just to kind of tell you a little bit about our response to how COVID-19 occurred, Huntington Station, the town of Huntington was a hotspot. Specifically Huntington Station, probably because we have a lot of essential workers that live there, and also, the closeness and the density, the way that the people interact there too. So what we were able to do was, of course, make sure that our essential services were provided, whether it was public safety, highway department, and of course, also our senior center, even though one of the first things we did in early March was close the senior center. We have an award-winning senior center. We have award-winning youth programs. We have award-winning adult daycare programs, but it was transitioning that to make sure that people still got the essential services. But of course, we had to close the senior center within that end of the second half week of March. And when we look at those types of decisions that we make, we're always in communication with Huntington Hospital, Dr. Fitterman and his staff, for the guidance before we do anything, to make sure that we have the medical backing and, of course, the expertise and the excellent job that they do there. So just the interaction that the town had with our county officials. We're on daily briefings with Steve Malone and our other town and village officials. Also, we host our now they were weekly, but now they're bi-weekly phone calls with our village officials. We have 4 incorporated villages in the town of Huntington: Northport, Ashbrook, and Huntington Bay and Lloyd Harbor. We'll have mayors and village boards, and we're always in communication with them. In addition to that, we have phone calls, of course, with the governor and them updating us on what the state guidance is, what can open, what had to close at the time, et cetera. So just a lot of decision making. And of course, it was an unprecedented area. I mean, of course, not having a pandemic for over 100 years. I mean, when I came into office, we were ready for blizzards, nor'easters, hurricanes, tornadoes, even terrorist attacks. But to say that we'd be going through a pandemic where I'd be sitting with staff with a face mask and, coming into terms of social distancing was definitely going into a new realm. And I'm very proud of our staff and our very devoted employees in the town of Huntington to make sure that essential services were still ongoing and people transitioned from working from home and from remotely and answering the phones. And we did have an outbreak in Town Hall where people did get COVID in certain departments, where we had to close down and reduce staff levels to make sure that people were safe and really coming together. And then when we slowly reopened, of course, coming together with a reopening plan and consulting with the medical experts, and even Huntington Hospital saying, well, that's an excellent opening plan. We should use this as a basis and a model. And right now, Town Hall was once closed to visitors and to residents, but now it's open by appointment, and you're able to—
How are we doing with schools, Chad?
How are we doing with schools, right?
Yes.
Well, basically right now, the state does have guidance on the schools, and it's up to the school districts. They have to have like a 3-phase plan. How to go all virtual, how to go, quasi-virtual, where they call, and of course, bring them all back. A lot of the school districts in Huntington right now are adopting a plan, and it's based on the school districts themselves. State Ed has to sign off on their plans. But right now, their opening plans are mostly, quasi, where 1 day in, 1 day out. They're still going to be getting of course, the deliverance of instruction that they need, but it's going to be more of the hybrid model right now. And that's what we're all preparing for, is a second wave. And the most is the preparation. What have we learned over the past several months, and how can we apply that to the future? Remember, gatherings are still limited to 50. Again, this week, the governor did announce that gyms can reopen. It looks like they'll be announcing in the next few days. One of the things that I missed the most are the movie theaters. That in the next few days, there'll be plans, coming out for movie theaters and such. So it's very structured. And one of the things that we did 2 months ago is we created the Small Business Task Force for recovery in the town of Huntington. And we have a group of people, the town board, everyone got to make one appointment. Then we also have our chambers represented, and we have 4 chambers of town. We have Melville, Huntington, East Northport, and Northport. In addition to that, we have the business improvement districts, the Huntington, Cold Spring Harbor, and Huntington Station business improvement districts represented on there. And they help, make decisions in terms of helping us guide with outdoor dining and how to make the permit process more accessible, more transparent, more streamlined for the businesses in terms of outdoor dining, and also street closures. We have certain streets that are closed in Huntington Village for outdoor dining, which include Girard Street, New Street, and Wall Street that are closed from Saturday, Sunday, to make this transition into the COVID world where people can still go out, but still follow state guidelines, still enjoy a meal, and really help our businesses in our retail space open. In addition to that, our retail space can reserve spots in front of their businesses, so where they could park and, of course, get get in and out very quickly if they're buying anything. So that's been very
One of the things that are very important to our town and to our country in general is the eating places.
Yes.
Now when I go out with Marguerite, we look for a place where we can be outside, but it is. And I'm wondering, are we populating the inside of the restaurants as well?
Well,
and when will that happen if we're not there yet?
Well, I think what you're looking at is that the restaurants inside, they can only be at 50% capacity due to social distancing restraints, but they can have outdoor dining if it's on the town or county right away or state right away. It's a quick application process that could be turned around in a few days. And if they want to pitch tents on their private parking lots, it's just a quick application to the ZBA that they approve basically every week. And I believe right now, those were set to expire in September, but it looks like we're going to hopefully extend those. So it will be more like a model based in Europe where, people can still have tents and outdoor dining. And I think that's the transition right now. I think more people feel more comfortable going outside to eat, to enjoy a meal. And I liked it in June. July and August was a little hot, so I like to go back inside. But again, it had to be a restaurant where, and I was never a hypochondriac. I was never guarded. I mean, I've been in the classroom. I used to, shake hundreds of hands a day. But I think in this type of world, we're all, our guard is up as we should be. And I think more people feel comfortable eating outside, than they do inside at this point. So we want to make sure that we support an environment that continues that even when it gets colder, the fall and the winter months. And I think that will be very important. The other group that we're always in constant communication with is the supervisors for Suffolk County. So we have 10 supervisors that represent the various towns in the county. Rich Schaefer is the head of our Supervisors Association. And so we have bi-weekly meetings also where we're discussing with one another and, learning from one another how do we deal with various issues, whether it's, how our building department works or how our parks department works, but also dealing with the COVID crisis and working with one another and supporting one another of, make sure that we have the county on board with several things and also, and of course the state government. And just going back to COVID, what we did do is we made sure that there was testing sites set up in Huntington Station, which was a hotspot area, along with the county, and those occurred at St. Hugh's Church. And we want to continue the testing.
How is it doing now?
What?
How is the testing doing in the outcomes in the places where it was hot?
Well, right now, things have really retained. As most places have like a 1.9% positive rate, we're a little bit higher in terms of what Northwell's reporting, closer to 3.5 or so. And I'll get updated numbers today. But it's something that we want to continue to guard, especially and make sure they're prepared for, especially as we go into the fall. So we're always reminding people, and you see I have my mask right here because I do have staff that socially distance, but we can't let our guard down, that we have to continue. And that's why New York was one of the worst areas. Long Island was one of the worst areas. But the reason we've come so far is because we've been, I think, vigilant in making sure that we've kept with social distancing, making sure that we're wearing masks in public when, parts of the country aren't. And I think that's all very important in terms of sharing that information, make sure we continue to, be by those guidelines and such. So I know it's been a hard pull for many people, and we continue to work along with our non-profits to make sure that people that are food insecure have the food on the table. So that's something that we constantly do, and make sure that they did get federal money to help with those handouts, whether that's St. Hughes or Manor Field that we do with the Second Precinct or the Family Service League. And I think that's very important too. Just to kind of go over some other issues, and please, let me know when my time is up and when you want to open up to questions. Huntington Station revitalization continues in terms of north of the Long Island Railroad. We have a building that's completing about 80 apartments right now. That's in its final stages, and really a lot of private development is occurring in that area. Also, in April during COVID, we did have a phone call with FEMA and also representatives from the EPA to see what kind of money we could bring in, along with state money and county money, for sewage lines south of the Huntington train station, because that will be in the next area that we really want to pride and develop with, and really to make sure that private development comes in with mixed use, including residential and retail, and that sewage will really be the next step there. It's about a $50 million price tag. So we're looking for federal money and also state money in that. And in conjunction with that, we have the old armory in Huntington Station, which is 85% complete in terms of design. And also we're looking at geothermal energy in that area. That goes to our ACERS committee for recommendations, and then the ESPA committee in the next few weeks. And we hope to ground break that. And that's going to be named the Conti Center, which will be a great addition to the Huntington Station area. I don't know if there are any questions at this point.
Yes. When you say you get a sewer line, where does that go? Is it, where's the plant?
That would be
Is it-
Bergen Point.
That would be going down to the South Shore.
Yes,
Okay.
because the connection's on 110 right now. So that would be going from south to New York Avenue all the way to the 110 Jericho area. And that's where the connection point would be. So to get that would be about $50 to $55 million. And that's the feasibility study the county did. And that's
When you get to Bergen Point, do you have the capacity down there, or you have to rebuild capacity?
No, capacity's there already. And one other thing that I'll give you an update on is the LIPA case. So in case you're not familiar with the LIPA case, this has been going on for 11 years in the town of Huntington. That's basically where LIPA sued, the town of Huntington, which is the assessing authority. And just as you grieve your taxes and you want a discount on your real estate taxes at home, LIPA did the same thing. And then they said, basically they're overpaying, that power plant is overassessed at $86 million, that they should only be paying $10 million. So that has a big impact on the residents of the town of Huntington. And this has been going on for 11 years. And as we mentioned, this is probably the most significant legal case that the town has ever faced in 1653. And probably when you look at historical data.
I testified one night at the town hall that I thought they were making a request that you could live with. Was that the final outcome?
So right now
the proposal that they made.
Right. So right now we have a proposal on the table, and the town board has held one public forum last week, and then we're going to hold the second public forum and vote on September 3rd. So basically it phases in over a 7-year period, and our next public forum is September 3rd, and we're asking the public to be via Zoom. And you can go to huntingtonny.gov, look for the public forum information. It starts at 6 o'clock, and the town board will be present, and the town attorney will give an overview of the settlement. Basically, this has kicked in $14.5 million to the school district over the 7 years to help them with budgeting purposes, and it will reduce the taxes on the plant. Remember, they want a 90% reduction to about a 46% reduction over that period of time. So it's a 7-year period with a 5-year freeze for a total of 12 years. And it's the best proposals out there that have been offered, whether it's been to the North Shore School District or to Port Jefferson area. And the Northport East Northport School Board did support the proposal with a 6-to-1 vote several weeks back. So now it's up to the town board to vote on it. And we need, out of the 5 members, we need a 3-2 vote. And we'll be voting on September 3rd. And again, when we look at the significance of this case, worst case scenario, if we lose the case, the taxpayers of the town of Huntington will owe back $850 million in back taxes. So,
That was the argument I made.
but yeah, well, yeah. So the average person not living in the East Northport School District will have a one-time line item on their bill of about 5,000 to 10,000. The people not living in the people living in the East Northport School District will be higher of about 15 to 20,000. But if you own a commercial business, you could be paying anywhere of a one-time fee of 60,000 to 120,000, depending on the commercial property. That would be a one-time payment. So the proposal on the table does get rid of the back tax of $850 million and puts in a phase down on the assessment over 7 years, which really allows the school district, because they're the most impact, because when you look at your real estate tax, 65 to 70% of the tax bill comes from those real estate, 65 to 70% of the tax bill goes to the school district. So that's the biggest impact, and that's one of the largest school districts that we have in the town. So they're in support of the proposal because of the fiscal planning that they can do as the assessment is decreased over the next 7 years. So like I said, and Councilman Smith said, this is probably one of the most significant things that face us since the American Revolution. And the other thing I would add to that is probably since Babylon split from Huntington back in the late 1800s. So this is the impact that it has on the livelihood of our residents, and also, the taxpayers in the town too.
Chad, if you have some closing remarks, we make them now, and otherwise I'll open it up to everybody.
Yeah. So I think, what we've done is really looked at Huntington Station revitalization in terms of the next area of investment in the town, with the mix of retail, business, and living area. And I think the next after that is to really look at the 110 corridor. How can we continue to bring businesses to the area, especially in the changing world when it comes to office space? Because if you looked at, how COVID has really redefined this, and even before COVID, we could see a trend that office space wasn't as needed as it once was before. So we want to make sure that our zoning measures keep up with the trends and people working more from home and doing more remote meetings and such. And that's going to be the next phase that we could look at, is where do we begin to tweak our I zone or industrial zone on the 110 corridor to make sure that it continues to be welcoming to businesses, to retail space, and also living spaces too.
We have a question from Ron Gomey now.
You wanted to ask Chad about the tax receipts. Did COVID have a noticeable reduction in your collections of taxes, or is that something that it's too timed out to be noticed now?
So one good thing is that in the past, so we have sales tax, but most of our revenue comes from real estate taxes. The town doesn't get any sales tax, right? In some counties, we have 62 counties in the state of New York. The sales tax in Suffolk County goes to the county and goes to the state. In some of the other counties upstate, they get a share, the towns get a share of the sales tax. We petitioned the state to allow the county, or to make the county give us a little revenue to the sales tax. Well, for budgeting purposes, I'm glad this wasn't the first year we received sales tax. I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but that was the biggest hit in terms of taxes collected, and the town's not, obviously dependent on sales tax, so we don't get it. In terms of real estate taxes, everything's been collected. It's not too bad, so that's been good. Where we have seen decreases in money is, people applying for building permits, because obviously, unless construction was considered essential during that time, but we're starting to make that up. And the other revenue that we're dependent on, but we were able to make it up in different areas because we had a hiring freeze and such, is that parking meters were suspended for several months down in Huntington Village. And to allow the transition, for outdoor, pickup and such for the restaurants, that's going back on. So we did see a little bit in that, but with the hiring freeze, we'll be able to make it up, during that period of time. So in terms of revenue received, I think the biggest hit that you saw was in sales tax, but the town's not dependent on it because we want to receive that. So I guess it's a one-up thing of not receiving that revenue stream.
So we have a question from Ron Gomey.
Yeah, hi, good morning, Chad. Thanks for joining us today and thanks for your leadership. My question pertains to the new sewer line. Will all the residents and businesses be connected to that new sewer line? And is that cost included in the 58 million? And what is the timeline of that project?
So basically, that would be more for the commercial areas on, at this point, at least the starting point would be for the commercial areas on New York Avenue and 110. So basically, we're looking at sources of money. We want to go to the state. So right now, we're still in the planning phases. And also with FEMA and the EPA have in the past, you know, allowed places that are in revitalization to get grant money for this. So going forward, it's really trying to figure out how to pay the $55 million before we could start. So it's a partnership with the county, with the state, and also the federal government. And during COVID in April, we did hold a meeting with representatives of FEMA and also the EPA to see where we can go for that money and how the money is available. And originally they were supposed to come out and visit it, but they were supposed to come in March during COVID, but we want to set up something again soon and to have them come out and visit the area. So the timeline is really right now, it's just making sure that the funding is there and it's a partnership between the county and also the state and moving forward from there.
So just to clarify, so it's only commercial establishments directly on New York Avenue or directly on 110? There's nothing to the east or west of New York Avenue or 110?
Correct, that's the way it's envisioned right now, but not to say it couldn't be expanded going forward.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have anybody else?
Yes, good morning. Hi, I'm Stu Almer, President.
Anybody else got a hand up?
Stu does. Hey, Stu.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
I can't hear you right now, but Stuart,
Can everyone hear me?
I can
Yeah,
hear
I
you.
hear you,
Oh,
Stu.
great. Okay. Good morning, Chad. How are you?
Good morning, how are you?
Great. I just wanted to introduce myself and thank you also publicly and ask all of you for your support. Stu Almer, I serve as President and CEO of the Gerwin Healthcare System in Comac. And as you can imagine, operating a nursing home and assisted living amongst other programs has been probably the most challenging of any business you could operate. We are in a very strong recovery mode, but the impact to us has been extreme. One significant project that's pending is for us to build, and it's very significant, 129 independent housing units on our campus, our 34-acre campus in Comac. This is significant for us, but also very important and helps the Huntington town obviously in many ways. So I want to thank you in advance. You've been very helpful. We're trying to get to the finish line of this project, hoping that we could begin site work and building soon. We're anticipating the fall, but this is a dramatic project called Fountain Gate Gardens that will be helpful in our recovery. We must have this to recover. If you received Newsday today, you probably saw an insert fly out as soon as you opened the paper. I got it today about this housing project. And if any of you could just please support Gerwin in your day-to-day discussions, if you need assistance, we very much appreciate it. But Chad, thank you again for your help regarding this specific project.
Thank you. Thank you. I know you've been in touch with us, and hopefully everything is working very smoothly. You know to reach out to us if it isn't. And thank you to Gerwin for all that you do. It's always a pleasure. I know I haven't been there in a while because of COVID, but send my regards to the staff and everyone.
I will. Thanks, Chad. Thank you, everybody.
Chad, what problems have lack of income had on the people who are renting from, apartment buildings and things like that? Has that had an impact on the town in any way? And is it a big problem in our town?
I just didn't hear the part of, you said lack of income in regards to.
Well, there's people who live in apartment houses.
Mhm.
they pay rent. Are we having a significant um, amount of people not paying rent and creating other problems?
Well, right now,
And is it impact on the town?
yeah, right now, the Attorney General in the state of New York and the governor's office have put out guidelines if people are struggling to pay their rent in terms of what landlords can do, what they can't do. And that's very important for, tenants and landlords to know what their rights are during COVID, number one. What we've seen during this time is food insecurity rise because of money issues. And it might have been that you were essential workers and you might have worked for the government and you might have been a teacher or that type of thing where you didn't see, but even like people that have never struggled in the past might have had very successful businesses, but all of a sudden their businesses stopped. And they've never had to struggle with money or putting food on their table in their lives. So it's been very complex in terms of food security needs because I think the population has changed and obviously grown a lot larger. So we've worked along with our not-for-profits in the area, in the churches, and our religious institutions to make sure that, whatever grant money that we can get from the county, whatever grant money that we can get from, the federal government through our community development agency, that they have the money and that they have the support that's necessary. So throughout the town on various days, there are places that give out food, which I think it's very, very important for people to know that, they don't have to be ashamed to get it and know that the services are there. In addition to that, like I was saying, we have an excellent senior citizen center. And that used to be open Monday through Friday, where people can get a hot meal, they could socialize, they could play pool, they could play bridge, they would have music. And we had to, of course, close that during COVID because of being one of the most vulnerable populations, during that time. But there are still services that we provide. Every Monday, there is a pickup system where the senior citizens come by, they could pick up 5 frozen meals that could last them the week, in terms of lunch. And also, depending on what the contributions are, they can get milk and eggs, which is good. And of course, if they can't come, or they don't have someone to help them come get it, our bus system will drop it off to them. And because we're the only town on Long Island out of the 13 towns that actually has its own bus system. We have the HART bus system, and which is very good in providing and helping us to drop off those meals and such. So I think what you've
Do you
seen is that,
employ volunteers?
well, right now,
Do you employ volunteers in getting that distribution done, Chad?
well, we have our staff that has transitioned from, normally servicing our seniors in the senior center to helping distribute. Normally that we do have volunteers that do help us out or interns, and we've done that in a limited capacity. It's changed a little bit because of COVID and the interaction that, we have with non-staff and staff. But, if people want to volunteer, we could always get them to an organization that needs volunteers too.
Okay, we have a question from Lee Silverman. I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Good morning, Mr. Supervisor. According to the Huntington Township Housing Coalition, there's a shortfall of at least 3,000 affordable units in the town, probably over the 10 years. And as I said, this goes long before your administration. The town really has not made a dent in this. Does your administration have any plans for trying to address the affordable housing crisis within Huntington?
So one thing that we did work along with the housing coalition, the Affordable Housing Coalition, last year was changing the requirements for accessory apartments in the town in terms of allowing people, if they choose, they don't have to live, and it kind of helps out new home buyers, but also helps out the senior citizens that you don't have to live in the major part of the home. You could live in the accessory apartment and rent out the, the larger part of the home. And I'm still on, okay. That will help, new homeowners if they want to help with their mortgage, but also help out the more senior homeowners in case they have empty nest or lost a spouse and they can move into the accessory apartment and rent out the major portion of their home. So I think that's helped. And also we changed the setback requirements to make it easier to allow people to rent out certain portions of their home. So I think that's been a big help. Also, with the continued revitalization of Huntington Station, you'll see more of the mixed use and the more building of apartments. And in addition, in my opening remarks, I mentioned the 110 corridor and really how the zoning has to change there to keep up with the economic changes that's going through. And we're taking a hard look and reforming the I zone. So if it's more of a mix of office, retail, hotel, and apartments. And I think that's the next area of focus in terms of, where apartments and these mixed uses can go.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, again, if you have any questions in the audience, either if you're in the chat, you can let me know and we can unmute you, or there's a way to raise your hand in the software and then I'll know that you have a question.
I was wondering if Claudia had any comments on, she's supervising apartment buildings. Claudia, can you get into the conversation? What impact has the present situation had on the business that you represent?
As far as our residential or our commercial?
You can comment on both.
Our commercial clients, I mean, we were in contact with them very early in the COVID situation, and worked out, payment schedules with them. So we did not take a big impact on our commercial clients. On our residential, I would say probably 10% of our residents at Gray Barn had difficulty in paying their monthly rent. And again, nothing is really being done. Just some of them have been let out of their leases because there's just no way they were ever going to be able to pay their rent. But for the most part, we have not had a great impact. Surprisingly, when COVID hit, we were at about 94% occupancy at Gray Barn. And today, even having added in 60 new apartments a month ago, we are probably at 92%. So that was a big surprise to us that it didn't, that we didn't take a bigger impact.
And I think Claudia brings up a very good trend in terms of, if you look at it, really the movement, and I think people feeling more secure coming out to Long Island to suburbia and leaving some of the city area. And I think even though the economy is struggling right now, I think we can all agree on that. And, just in terms of the popularity of housing, whether it's Huntington or other parts of Long Island, out east, and really seeing the movement right now from the urban areas out to suburbia. And you can see that, in fiscal numbers, in terms of the way the prices have at least stabilized or dropped in New York City, and as they are rising up in the Long Island area, because it's a popular area, because of COVID to move out to. So I think that's very interesting to see that trend. And, I think that's going to continue for a while.
I actually think that real estate prices are pretty stable. Is that your reading too, Chad?
On Long Island, I think that they're stable or they're rising. I think they're up a little bit too. I think it's competitive because, one of the things that I used to do, was a lot of real estate closing. So I'm still in touch with the real estate agents, and then I have family that's looking at housing right now. And a lot of the houses, there's bidding wars on, and just because there's a huge surge of people moving out to Long Island right now, and there's an asking price, and usually you negotiate from the asking price downward, but there's a lot of people that are overbidding, past the asking price, and a lot of these houses are going into bidding wars now. And I've known, just to kind of look at the rents, I don't know specifically how the rents are going on Long Island now, but I don't see them decreasing. But I know in New York City, where people are renting right now, if you're renting an apartment or something, there's like at least a 1-year break. Something might have rented for several $100s more per month per unit prior to March. And I think, I think you've seen that. And I think, you'll see this trend continue at least through December and the end of the year, where housing prices on Long Island will stabilize and rise, and in New York City, decrease.
So I have a question, Supervisor Lupinacci. I'm running the meeting here. I'm a LIMBA administrator, but my name is Frankenberg. I'm in Dix Hills. And one thing that you haven't mentioned so far is the electricity outage and storm preparedness. And, we had a rough month. So many of my friends and acquaintances are making noises about burying power lines. I wonder if you can discuss that and other plans that might be made to improve our stability.
So the tropical storm 2 weeks ago was huge, and the impact of it was widespread across Long Island. We had over 1,200 trees come down across the town, and we have about 80,000 parcels, that includes residential and commercial, that get electricity from PSE&G. At one point, Tuesday night going into Wednesday, the storm, 40,000 or 50% of our residents didn't have electricity. And especially along the North Shore area of the town, but it was widespread throughout the town. And there were areas that didn't get back their electricity from anywhere from 7 to 9 days. And I think that when you look at this, a lot of these trees do fall on power lines. So kind of, it ties our hands to a certain extent in terms of what our highway department and what our general services department can move unless they have interaction with PSE&G. So we did open up our storm center. The superintendent, Mr. Arelli, the highway superintendent, and I did hold a press conference, and we were on the ball right away. The amount of the gravity and and PSE&G's response in terms of their communication system going down, where residents couldn't call them, was very problematic. Also, a lot of times when you have these large storms, you're dependent on workers from other states coming here. I think there was a struggle getting workers from other states because of COVID, because their families wouldn't allow their moms and dads or their loved ones to come to Long Island just because of the natural state of affairs with the pandemic. And I think that was problematic too, adding another layer. The other addition is that many of us now work from home, whether or not you were taking summer classes as a college student or you were working home from virtually. And so now you don't have any power to even work. And in addition to that, Optimum and Verizon had to struggle getting their customers back to a certain extent too. So what we do right now as a town, we reassess and we look at all of the trees, and this is what's going on right now in terms of the cleanup. And we've, to this date, and if you look at the pictures on our town website, we have 156,000 cubic yards of trees and limbs and branches right now. That's at our Elwood Highway yard. And I was there a few days back with the superintendent of highway. So right now we're in the cleanup mode still in terms of making sure that, if you put your trees and your fallen branches to the curb, that our refuse department, also our highway department, will continue to collect those. And then we go through a period where we reevaluate to see where our limbs are. And this was last done widespread in 2012 after Sandy by the town. And whether or not they're on our facilities, or in addition to that, whether or not they are, touching power lines and such, PSE&G will take care of those. And then our highway department will continue to trim back branches and other loose limbs and dying trees to prepare for the next storm. And it looks like it's going to be a very, very active season over the next few weeks too, until the end of October, beginning of November. So we're still in this hurricane tropical storm season. So we need to be prepared, considering that we got this one early in August. In addition to that, the PSC, the Public Service Commission that regulates PSE&G because it's a public authority utility company, has been holding hearings. And I know the Senate has held hearings, including Senator Gorn and the other state senators on Long Island. So if there are certain instances that you know of where you had bad interactions, let the PSC know, let your state representatives know, so they can take that into consideration to make that part of the record going forward. Also, PSE&G did put out a program this week, if you weren't aware, that they will reimburse you up to $250. If you lost frozen food or food in your refrigerator that spoiled during that time, and and they'll try to cooperate going forward.
And On my property, I have 80-foot oak trees, a bunch of them, and I lost some major limbs. In fact, one crushed my Subaru Outback, but I have these major pieces of timber on my property that that I cut up, and they're like 13, 14-inch diameters. How do I get rid of them? Because you can't put them in your trucks.
Right.
Do you have a special program for that?
So you could use it for your fire pit, Ernie. But you know what? You could bring it out right now. Normally, non-storm related, normally everything's got to be bundled and cut up because and the reason is not because we're difficult, but the reason is because we have the hydraulics in our refuse trucks can't crush very large timber, when you see the garbage trucks that come by. But because we're in a storm-related instance, you could take whatever out to the curb and call the highway department. They'll come by and pick it up.
And I have to say, as a Huntington resident, those trucks did an amazing job picking up the refuse. Because, like Ernie, we have a lot of over mature oak trees here in Dix Hills.
Yeah.
And every storm, it's going to be an ongoing thing. These trees were not this big when they built this development back in the 60s, but here we are today.
Yeah, and I live near the Waldman Mall, and I had two huge oak trees that were built when my house was built in the 30s, and I had them. One was dying, and I took it down last year, and the other one, was taken down. And I think in this storm I would have lost at least one of them that would have crushed my house or crushed my neighbor's house. And but that's something that you have to keep an eye on because during these storms, the winds are very unpredictable. If you look at this last storm, we only got 1/4 inch of rain, right? We were supposed to get anywhere from 3 to 5 inches at one point. The rain reduced, but the winds were very high. And if you took a summer's nap, like in the afternoon, between those hours of 2 and 4, you would have missed everything. But the winds really picked up, and we were lucky though to a certain extent. Well, the ground was dry because we haven't received much rain until this past week or so. But if the amount of rain that was supposed to occur of 3 to 5 inches on top of that would have really loosened up, I think, some of the roots too. So it was just one of those combinations. Now, again, this was a widespread storm, island-wide. Last June, they called it a vertical windstorm. That's what the National Weather Service called, but it pinpointed in Comac and East Northport.
Yeah, my neighborhood.
Those areas last
end
of June looked like a war zone. But that was very pinpointed, so we could put all our resources in that part of town, whether it was PSC&G, whether it was Highway Department, whether it was General Services helping out the Highway Department. But this was so widespread, island-wide, right, especially along the North Shore. That's why the impact was larger this time.
So just to follow up, you were mentioning, because my question really was, what can we do to mitigate this problem in the future? And so as I drive my car around, I still see what looks to me like, calamities waiting to happen with trees hanging over, power lines all over. But it sounds from your answer that first it has to be deliberated whether it's a county road or a state road or a PSEG issue or a private property before that particular limb can even be handled. Is that correct?
Well, what it is if it's touching the power lines, usually PSE&G will take care of it. And they did actually start a program when they took over as the utility provider back in like 2013. I think it was the beginning of 2013. They did a very aggressive program of cleaning out the limbs that were touching the wires. Now, what happens is that was 7 years ago. And I'm sure they continue during that 7 years, but that's where the refocus is going to be. And then the town will take care of the trees that, and the limbs that aren't touching the branches. And, and again, you said it's like interjurisdictional where it might be some areas where, the county has to take care of it or the, depending if it's on the state right away, et cetera. But that will be a targeted and collaborated effort between those areas right now. But if there is a tree that you see in your area that you think is a threat, whether it's rotting or dying or sick or the limbs are out of control, let us know, and then we can always make sure that we forward that information to the proper people that are in charge of that tree.
Okay.
Well, we get our trees trimmed every 2 years, and it's a big bill, but they don't know where the rot is in many cases, and so you really do have a weakened condition that's not visually visible.
Right.
And when that wind blew, it took down those limbs that were weak.
Oh,
So
yeah.
as vigilant as you want to be, you may not be there on target, getting
Correct.
it
We
all
have a
done.
few more people with
So-
their hands up. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think if we move off this topic, we'll have enough time for that. John F., I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Okay. Good morning, Supervisor
Morning.
Lupinacci. I'm a Huntington Town resident, pretty active in the community here. And I'm in Huntington Village quite a bit. In fact, I'm going to be going in there after this Zoom call. And there's an ongoing development at the old town hall, which is being renovated, expanded, I believe, into a hotel, which I think will be great for the economic activity, and ultimately, I think, for the parking situation, which is part of what that plan calls for. Can you give us an update of where that stands and what's going on with that?
Yeah, so they did demolition, several weeks back, and they hope to have groundbreaking in the next month in terms of the refurbishment. So it just received a Smart Growth Award. The developers of that probably about a week and a half ago, and they are moving forward. And it's going to be a beautiful addition to the downtown Huntington area. So, I mean, when you look at it, it's going to really tie in because in the Huntington Village area, there is no hotel. Meanwhile, you have some of the greatest venues, whether it's the Paramount or our Huntington Arts Council, the Heckscher Museum or Heckscher Park, or the wonderful bars and restaurants. There's a great integration of culture, food, and entertainment. So really, that hotel will kind of tie in. It's really, I think, the economic tie-in that we need in Huntington Village. So
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So basically, it's going to be 80 rooms. They did the demolition already, and now the next thing is the groundbreaking in terms of the refurbishment.
I believe I read early on that part of the redevelopment of that historical town hall was to preserve a lot of the original integrity of that. Is there going to be anything historically done to memorialize the importance of that building as the original town hall?
Yes. The original facade's going to be preserved, and they're working along with Huntington Historical Committee and our town historian to make sure that that part of the rich history is preserved. And that was our town hall up to 1979. And then we kind of moved diagonally across the street to the old Huntington High School, where the town bought it for $1. So that's where I'm sitting right now, is on our new town hall. And that was moved into 1979, 1980. So really that was our center of government up until the late 70s. So yes, there will be a big commitment, and that will persevere in terms of really preserving that facade, the front facade, and a lot of the historical integrity of the building too.
And I just wanted to say as a note that your senior center is Class A. I mean, they're great people. They have a wonderful outreach. They actually called me the other day just to check in, to say hello and whatever. You do a great job with that, with the seniors. So thank you very much for that.
We have one more person waiting, and I think if we switch now, there'll be enough time for that last question. Lynn Elson Nielsen has a question.
Yeah, Supervisor, just wondering, I know Huntington Town has made a commitment to green energy infrastructure, but I'd like to know, in terms of investing in smart grid technology, what are you guys doing on that front? How much of it is, a town decision versus how much of it is, the utility companies? And what exactly are the concrete actions you're taking to improve green energy infrastructure?
Well, I think, as I mentioned a little bit earlier about the Conti Center, which is going to be a community center built in Huntington Station. Right now, we're looking at the mix of solar and geothermal energy there, and working along with state grants, NYSERDA grants, to achieve that technology. So that I think that's very important. In addition to that, we're working on a microgrid project that we're in phase 2 of funding, and that's making sure that Huntington High School, Huntington Hospital, not Huntington High School, Huntington Hospital, our YMCA and Town Hall are connected on a microgrid where they are resilient and can survive these storms. And we were in a second round of grant funding for that, and hopefully we'll be receiving a third round of grant funding. So our sustainability energy coordinator is working on that very hard. And about 3 years ago, the Lieutenant Governor came down to announce those grants. And when you look at this last storm, the Town Hall was out for about 12 hours, and we were on backup generators and such. So, we were working on those backup generators, but even a place like Huntington Hospital was out for several hours too. So the connectivity of the YMCA in Town Hall and Huntington Hospital through this microgrid would be very important too. So again, it's not only on us, but of course it's on our other stakeholders and working along with the county and of course the state and sometimes even the federal government, depending on what type of grants and assistance are there.
So your book.
I'd like to.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Did you want to finish your thought, Lynn?
I just was curious. So this is focused primarily on new construction, not on existing buildings?
No, because we do look at also, we have Dix Hills Ice Rink where we have 2 ice rinks and 1 pool over in Dix Hills Park where we're looking at possible geothermal too. So that's already an existing building, but also applying whatever kind of sustainable energy we can have to a new construction also.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Supervisor, we at LIMBA are very concerned about the environment, and your efforts on green energy are very interesting to me. And if you have some staff member to write an essay on it, we'll publish it on our newsletter.
Oh yeah.
And give credit where credit is due.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Therese Kinsley is our sustainability officer, who's a very hard worker, very intelligent, and a professional engineer, also LEED certified, and really on the forefront of grant assistance also, and where we can move in terms of sustainable energy in the town too. So I'll put Ernie, I'll put you in touch with her. Email me and I'll get you her email address today.
Thank you. Before we close, I want to tell people we're going to have Judge Wackler on our next meeting.
Oh, wow.
And Judge Wackler was a very brilliant jurist. And I wanted you to know that. Chad, I want to thank you so much for being our speaker today.
Thank you.
And I want to thank our sponsors and Lee Silberman in particular. And I wish you all a good morning and thank you all for attending.
Thank you all for being here, and thank you to Ernie and to Lee for the sponsorship, and to the rest of LIMBA. Thank you for having me here today.
Thanks again, Supervisor Lupinacci.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day.
Bye.